Michigan Family Wellness, Episode 23.
Here at Michigan Family Wellness, we believe chiropractic care and nutritional-based therapies are a foundational part of a healthy family lifestyle. No matter where you're at in the mitten, having a family is such an exciting time of life. So instead of feeling overwhelmed by stress, fatigue, and responsibilities with the kids, we invite you to become part of this empowering community to create happy, healthy families. By providing engaging interviews and practical applications, Dr. Wollner cultivates family health by equipping our listeners with the tools they need to elevate wellness in their own family. Dr. Wollner passionately serves the Michigan community at his chiropractic and nutrition-based practice, where he specializes in pregnancy, pediatrics, and family wellness care. And now, here's your host, Dr. Kyle Wollner.
Good day, Michigan families, and welcome to another empowering episode of Michigan Family Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle, and today we have an empowering interview with Tara Gesling. Tara has an incredible story of healing. There were multiple components of her inspiring recovery, but the two I want you guys to listen for in the interview are how chiropractic adjustments and nutritional therapies played a vital role in her journey to health and vitality. But before we get to today's episode, the Michigan Family Wellness Clinic is all about helping you and your family. We're family-centered here, and when you're the single parent or the stressed-out spouse just struggling to get through each day and take care of the kids and advance your career and on and on and on, we're here for you. What I help most of my patients with is resiliency, and the way I define resiliency is giving you the strength to adapt to the stress in your life. Sometimes we do have stressors that need to go, whether they be something environmental or an abusive relationship or just a job that makes you so stressed out or just the nutrient-deficient food we eat. Other times the stress isn't necessarily going away, but the way that our body is adapting to that stress isn't sustainable. I help my patients, many of them women and mothers, but many fathers also, increase their resiliency, and I equip them with that strength to adapt to the challenges and stress in their life. The saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, is absolutely true, and that's why I have committed this podcast and the MFW Clinic to service this community through integrity, certainty, and authenticity. You guys deserve the best doctor-patient experience and the best results in the shortest amount of time. So if there was a way to elevate your health, your family wellness, and your resiliency, would you be interested? If this message is resonating with you, or if you would like to start a conversation about your specific situation, head on over to MichiganFamilyWellness.com and you can email me, schedule a complimentary phone conversation, or head on over to Facebook and send me a Facebook message. All right, so let's introduce Tara before we jump into today's interview. At just 28 years young, Tara was disabled, diagnosed with a myriad of conditions, including late-stage reflex sympathetic dystrophy, chronic pain syndrome, autoimmune thyroid disease, fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue left her overwhelmed with no hope for healing. The medical system prescribed surrendering to a life riddled with limitations and pills. Devastated, she never imagined this would be the beginning of an incredible journey from despair to triumph. It was from her lowest point of wheelchair dependence that Tara's personal 180-degree wellness revolution was inspired. Her self-guided process of reversing damage and rebuilding health is restoring her to function and vitality. She is an example of the healing that is possible when a simple, functional approach acknowledging bio-individuality is implemented. In her book, Tara shares her discoveries, research, and experiences that have contributed to her return to a joyful and fulfilling life. The 180-degree wellness revolution can help you learn to listen to your symptoms, begin uncovering the root causes of chronic conditions in your life, and propel you to find your own healing solution. All right, families, let's dive in. Welcome, families, to the interview portion of today's podcast. My guest on the show today is Tara Gesling. Tara, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I've just told our families a little bit about you as the professional, but one of the core values here on the Michigan Family Wellness Podcast is family. Tell us more about Tara as the person and what family looks like for you.
Well, I'm a mother to a 16-year-old. My daughter is absolutely amazing, and I'm also a wife. I've been married for almost 30 years to the same guy.
Congratulations. That's awesome, yeah.
Yeah. So to me, family is being surrounded by people that I love, the people that I enjoy being around, and that includes obviously my immediate family, my husband, my daughter, my parents, and sister, and but it also includes my friends. I've got a lot of friends that are like family to me, and I live on a farm, and I have a lot of animals, and so I also include them as my family.
Beautiful. And another thing I love to say here on the Michigan Family Wellness Podcast is that we're smitten with the mitten. So I always ask my guests to share what they love about Michigan. Is there a connection there for you?
Yes, there is. It's kind of cool. One of my very first mentors was actually a veterinarian, and his name was Dr. John Aldred, and he was he went to college in Michigan. So he used to share with me all kinds of wonderful stories about Michigan and some of the places that he spent time at, and it was just amazing. And I would love to visit one of these days. Something I've always had on the back burner is to come up north to Michigan. I'm in Virginia, so it's a little ways, but I would love to come up that way and see some of these places that he told me all about.
Fantastic. I just love for our listeners to be able to emotionally connect with our guests and myself. We are real people. Although we have our areas of expertise, we do love families, and, we do have this love for the state of Michigan, the Great Lakes, just the natural beauty here. So, again, Tara, we heard a little bit of your story in your introduction, but what I'd like you to do is just go more in depth with us, because I really feel that the mothers and the fathers listening to this episode are going to get a lot of value from your experiences, from your health challenges, and your recovery story. So go ahead and just tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, well, when I was in my mid to late 20s, I ended up becoming very ill, and I ended up actually in a wheelchair for almost 5 years. So it was not fun, and I definitely learned a lot. But I'll kind of go back a little bit for you and kind of bring about how I feel it all happened. And that was when I was younger, growing up. I grew up on a farm, but my parents were not farmers. And we didn't really know that much about food. We didn't understand the difference between fast food versus whole foods. And most people didn't, I guess. But anyways, in my family, my mom didn't like to cook. And my dad was always, he spent a lot of time at work, so he wasn't there to cook. And so basically my mom, we chose fast foods. We ate fast foods. If it came in a box, if it was quick, easy to make, powdered, frozen, whatever, a lot of TV dinners, that type of thing. And so we ate fast food, a lot of fast food. And I had no idea at the time how that would affect me. I had no idea that could actually even affect health. So as I was growing up, all these years that I ate fast food and things that were not good for me, of course, they were delicious, but yeah. I had no clue. So it ended up catching up with me when I got into my 20s. And so when I went to the doctor's visit, I was in my early 20s, and here I had high cholesterol, I had high blood pressure, high triglycerides, all these things going on. But the doctor would look at me and they'd say, oh, well, you're young, no big deal, don't worry about it, So I didn't. That was, fine with me. I didn't want to worry about it, so I just moved on. And eventually, as I was saying, when I got into my mid-20s, I started having some health problems. And then I had an injury. It was a torn ligaments and tendons in my left leg, and it did not heal. And I did everything that they told me to do, to the T. I was like the perfect patient, but it still didn't heal. And eventually I was diagnosed with a neuromuscular disease and a whole bunch of other things, autoimmune diseases, and the disease that I actually was diagnosed with was called reflex sympathetic dystrophy, RSD. And so that also I was diagnosed with chronic pain syndrome, fibromyalgia, hypothyroid. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune component of thyroid disease, and also autoimmune rheumatoid arthritis, hypoglycemia, adrenal dysfunction. I was actually stage 3, chronic fatigue, allergies, food sensitivities. I think I already said high cholesterol. I had kidney stones, high blood pressure, irritable bowel. I had herniated discs in my back and my neck. I was having severe muscle spasms. I also had liver disease, gut dysbiosis, leaky gut, gallbladder problems, adrenals, kidneys. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And I was only in my, during those times of the diagnosis, in my late 20s and early 30s.
Wow. So, yeah, essentially, gosh, that's just it's a very compelling story. It's a very overwhelming story, just to kind of hear all of that all in one go. What I guess I want to ask you is, I understand there was a component of your history where you were actually in a wheelchair and you have all these diagnoses, that run the gamut from RSDS to autoimmune hypothyroid. How did you go from, in a wheelchair to the thriving, healthy life that you have now with enough energy and vitality to, publish a book and have a family and be a mother and a wife?
Well, during those years that I was really, really ill and the time in the wheelchair, I actually almost died, and I had a near-death experience, and it was the biggest blessing in my life. When I came back from that near-death experience, I literally knew that I could get better. And I wasn't quite clear on how I was going to do that, but I knew that I could. So I became motivated, and I started studying and learning. And I talked with people. I learned from Chinese practitioners. I met a chiropractor, started learning from him. I started learning as much as I could. The problem I had was I couldn't retain it because my brain was not working all that well. It was,
gotcha.
A lot of people deal with that kind of thing. So I had to get motivated, and I had to start understanding what was causing the issues. What was it that was my body? What was my body trying to tell me?
Would you say that was kind of your defining moment where there was perhaps a paradigm shift or, having that near-death experience and then coming back from that? Or was there something else that you would say was more foundational or motivational?
I guess at that time, I was ready to go. I was so ill, and life was not fun. So I was ready to just go. And I'd actually said a prayer. Either show me what I need to do or take me. So when I experienced the near-death experience, I think that was a profound moment for me. It was truly an eye-opener. And when I realized that, the illnesses that we see and that we deal with are our body basically giving us symptoms. It's our body telling us that there's something that's out of balance. And I had to learn and figure out what was out of balance and what was my part in that. In other words, the food. I came back knowing I was being poisoned. And so I had to start looking at, the first thing I looked at was all the prescription medications I was on, because at that time I was on, I think, an average anywhere from 11 to 13 medications a day. And that did not include any supplements that I was taking.
Wow.
So I literally was poisoning myself, literally. And so I had to understand that. And so the first thing I wanted to do was get off of those medications, as soon as I could. Mm-hmm. And so I had to enlist my doctor to help me with that, which is a whole other story. But it was really interesting. And then I realized the component of the food. And, a cool thing happened. A girl knocks on my door, and I believe that, God sends people into your life, when you're ready. The
Absolutely.
Teacher arrives. And so this girl knocks on my door. She had just moved into the area, and so she also had a farm, and so she wanted to meet somebody else that had a farm, and so she comes, knocks on my door, and lo and behold, she was studying nutrition. So she was the person that opened my eyes to what was in the food, and that there was a lot of chemicals in the food that I was eating, and all these boxed foods and frozen foods and things, were poisoning me, literally, and that I needed to change that in order for my body to heal. I had to start removing the burden, and that burden was coming from a lot of these additives and things that are not food.
Absolutely.
So
I'm always amazed at the level and, the significance in terms of your healing that people can accomplish just by changing their diet. I mean, even if, and that is part of lifestyle, but I've even known people that don't even do any exercising. Like if you just change the way you eat, you can significantly change the way your brain functions, change the way your metabolism functions, losing weight. You talked about brain fog a little bit, or having some cognitive issues, and especially being on so many medications. I can't even imagine, what these medications are doing to our societies and our culture's, brain health. Just for one thing,
Exactly.
That might be the topic of a completely different podcast episode. But I want to kind of circle back to what you were, really back to your story, back to your experiences a little bit. And my question for you is, was there ever a point where you had this paradigm shift of, okay, this no longer defines me? Or, was that a component for you? Because this is one thing that I see in my office with my patients. Sometimes people take their identity in their fibromyalgia, or in their disease or their diagnosis. So my question is, how do you not let your circumstances, because, as we heard you say, you had a bunch of circumstances, diagnosis, in a wheelchair, so young, so early on in your life. How did that not become just an overwhelming thing? And how did you kind of turn around and really start to come out of that?
Oh, that's such a great question, because that was me. Literally, I took on the identity of all of these diseases. And when you do that, this is what I learned, when you do that, it's very difficult to let go of it. It's very difficult to move away from it. And because it's not as simple as just letting go. It's moving away from it. When we identify with something, whether it's our job or whether it's a disease or symptoms that we have, whatever it is, when we identify with something, we take ownership in it. And when we take ownership in it, it's much more difficult to let go of it. So a big lesson for me was that those things, the RSD, the autoimmune diseases, all of these things, well, they're basically labels. They're symptoms that are compiled together and given a label. And they're not me. That's just something I'm experiencing at this time. And when I did finally understand that, and I was able to put that to work, for myself, I was able to move beyond a lot of these things. And I'm not saying that everything is perfect, because, no, but you can move into a space where you can now manage, and you can move beyond a lot of these symptoms, and you can actually become, again, a healthy, happy person and enjoy your life.
Absolutely.
And have a lot of vitality.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you get into this in your book, but just for our listeners, what were some of the therapies or, the lifestyle changes? I know you talked about food changes that you made, and I know you mentioned chiropractic, but it seems as though there were many people, that played a part, almost like a healthcare team that you kind of employed. It just wasn't one thing. It was a combination of different things that played a role in your successful health recovery. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. And it all comes in layers, because we're not ready to address everything all at once. So basically what was at the surface at the time was what I would address. And then I would peel that layer, which would then allow me to go to the next layer. And then when I peeled that layer, it would allow me to go to the next layer underneath that. And so, there was a lot of different modalities that I used. There was the physical components, which was the testing, hormone, urine, blood testing, different things like that, to understand physically what was going on in my body. And then there were the emotional components, which I had to address. I had things that happened to me when I was a child that needed to be addressed, and they were tough. They were not easy. And I had to address them with baby steps, as I could. Just everything that I did, basically, and this is what I teach in my book, is baby steps. It feels like sometimes like it's so slow, but that's how you get there. That's how you get there. It's one step at a time. And then there's also genetic components. Epigenetics. There's a lot of good information out today with epigenetics and understanding how we literally dump our trash, our waste, our ability, our biological ability to remove toxins. And I had to learn about, things like dental, and there was a lot of dental components with what I was dealing with. I had a lot of dental work done right before I had gotten ill and had no idea it was connected. So, the food, all of these things are so connected. And yes, definitely chiropractic. I've had a chiropractic, I started using chiropractic when I was in the wheelchair. The woman that introduced me to nutrition also introduced me to her chiropractor. And,
Fantastic.
and I still use chiropractic to this day, 20-some years later. And, it was a lot of different things, but I had to identify what I could do one step at a time to make changes in my life that would then allow my body to heal, that would reduce that burden, that would help me to get rid of the toxins. And toxins come in all kinds of forms. They come in physical, they come in emotional, they come in, people, sometimes the people in your life or the job that you're working that you hate, all of these things play a major component.
I really appreciate everything you're saying here, Tara. I think you're laying down a lot of value, and I really agree with that, that toxin framework, which really relates to a inflammatory framework or a state of inflammation or an understanding of, if you have unresolved toxins that are causing unresolved inflammation, or, so many things influence the inflammatory response. But what I want to really outline for our listeners and many of my patients who are listening, they already know this because, I say it every day in the office, but we know that endorphins, the body produces endorphins. Endorphins are extremely powerful at resolving and fixing chronic inflammation. Not only that, but the neurotransmitter GABA is chemically similar to the endorphin response. So what I outline for a lot of my patients and what I teach often is that in terms of compounds that the body produces on its own, that don't cost you extra money to, buy in a supplemental form and take and all of that, glutathione, vitamin D, and endorphins are right up there. And we know from research that the neurotransmitter GABA is chemically similar to those endorphins and initiates that anti-inflammatory response, like I said, very similar to the endorphins. So here's the thing. Here's the big take-home point. Those spinal chiropractic adjustments have been proven to help dampen and eliminate that ongoing inflammatory response through the release of that neurotransmitter GABA from the spinal cord or from the dorsal root ganglion of the spine. And all of that, that's just a fancy way of saying that chiropractic adjustments, it's a scientifically backed natural treatment that when applied at the right level, at the right time, at the right sequence, you mentioned the onion metaphor. I love that. That's great. It can be one of the most powerful signals for healing your body because it's that central nervous system, that brain-body, that brain-tissue connection. And I really feel that, you can do all of these, different applications like nutrition, exercise, diet, and lifestyle changes. All of that is phenomenal and wonderful. But at the core, at the foundation, if you have that neurologic interference, I really feel that you're going to be limited. Your improvement is going to be hindered in that way. That's going to be a roadblock. And it's so easy, it's so natural and gentle to just get that chiropractic adjustment and to remove that interference and restore that nervous system flow and just time travel and accelerate your healing results. So I don't know if that's been part of your experience, but that's what I work with people on every day in the office. Would you agree?
Oh, I definitely agree. And like I said, I've been a patient of chiropractic for over 20 years. And, and it's always something that I look at it as now today it's preventive care for me.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. At one time it was acute care, but now it's preventive care.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I think everyone knows, and I believe the American Dental Association, if you look at the framework of dentistry, everyone knows, go get your teeth checked and clean every 6 months or, at least once a year. I think they've done a great job with that. But one of the things I often tell people is, let's say you don't take care of your teeth. Let's say you don't get those 6-month checkups and those cleanings. What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, your teeth can fall out, or you can, get cavities and all that. And it's not the end of the world. You're not necessarily going to die. They can give you a new set of teeth, and you can still live relatively healthy and normal life. But here's the thing. If you don't take care of your spine, or if you don't resolve those slips and falls that you have when you're younger, and that structure gets imbalanced or unbalanced, and you have that dysfunction, we're not at the point with our healthcare system that we have a spinal transplant. We can't give you a new spine. And so that's why I really advocate, to your point, is for the preventative care. I tell my patients, every 4 to 6 weeks, just go get checked. Make sure things are moving in the right way and that you're working with a qualified, licensed doctor who knows what they're talking about. And this actually brings us to my next point that I wanted to make with you here, Tara. Obviously you started researching and, educating yourself on, different things that you can do, practical applications. How did you discern or differentiate, what was going to help you and what was going to hurt you? Because here's what I see a lot in the office too. People go online, they Google, they Facebook, they YouTube, and they see all these detoxes, these cleanses, these bone broths, and nothing against those things at face value. But those can be either really powerful tools and signals for healing, but again, if you do those things at the wrong time, in the wrong sequence, at the wrong dose, they can actually make you worse, and I see this all the time. So again, the question is, how do you discern what's right for you? Do you work with a doctor? Do you have someone helping you, a coach? How does that play out?
What I do, and what I did at that time, was I usually would seek out a practitioner that was knowledgeable and that had the experience, because I actually did do a couple of things on my own, and I don't say don't do that, don't try, but I always tell people, listen to your body. Your body is always going to tell you what's going on. It's usually that I guess the word would be denial. I think we deny a lot of times, like if you do a particular cleanse or something and you start feeling really, really bad, a lot of people will deny that they're feeling that bad. And they'll just be like, oh, well, I'm just going to push through this. And sometimes, like you said, they can do more damage than good. Other times, maybe what it is they're, getting a little bit of a Herx reaction, and, they just need to back off a little bit, and then they do it okay. That was my experience. But after that, I kind of thought about it, and it was like, I really need to be talking to people that know a little bit more about it than me, that have experienced it. And those people can kind of guide me and keep me from, doing anything too damaging or whatever to my own body, because that's the last thing I want to do. But, so I seek out professionals who know more than me, always. And I find really good mentors, and I learn from them. And then, I trust my own instincts also. As I've gone through this whole process, I've learned that my body really doesn't lie. My body will tell me what's going on. It's just I have to listen. I have to not deny it, and I have to listen to it and go with my gut instinct, because I literally had a lot of doctors that, bless their hearts, they didn't mean any harm. But, when I was on all those prescription medications, what was that doing to me? It was destroying. It was literally destroying cells in my body, and it was slowly killing me. So, again, it's one of those things where, there's a lot of different professionals out there, and you have to realize that a lot of practitioners are trained very differently. So I learned to seek out the ones that were trained in, I studied Chinese medicine, so I seeked out mentors and professionals in Chinese medicine. I also went to chiropractors who understood nutrition, who understood kinesiology, who understood how the body works and how the body is literally talking to you. And I also used a naturopath doctor. And so the combination of all of those, and then eventually myself, I trained in functional diagnostic nutrition, and I trained in, other things too. But these are the types of things that I did. And to this day, I still always have a coach or a mentor who can help me because, again, we kind of get, I don't know what the word, side blinders, I guess is what you could call them, where you don't always see everything, because it's you, it's yourself, and you can't always see everything. And sometimes it's really good to have another person looking on that doesn't have the emotional investment that you do.
Absolutely.
That can actually show you what they see, and then you take that in as a factor, when you're making decisions. So I use a coach, definitely.
Absolutely, and I love that message of, listening to your body and, not trying to deny, those signals. It's almost like if you're driving in your car and that light is going on, in your dashboard, change your oil or check this fluid or, tire pressure or whatever. Don't just ignore it, actually address it and, prevent a much bigger problem later on down the road. And that's really what Michigan Family Wellness Clinic and this audio podcast is all about, is being that compassionate lighthouse to lead people down the path of resiliency and restoration. So Tara, before we wrap things up here, what are some of the practical applications? I know we've mentioned a few, but if you were just to summarize, maybe a top 2 or a top 3 things that families listening can do to elevate their wellness, some simple changes that people can start with today as a result of listening to this episode, what would you advise them?
Well, the first thing I would advise is look at what you're eating, what you're putting in and on your body. Start looking at the labels. Become familiar with what is in the ingredients list. Understand that food is providing the fuel and the building blocks for every action that your body performs, and that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your body's in a constant state of multitasking, breaking down proteins, converting fat to energy, transporting glucose, building hormones, sending neurochemical messages like we talked about earlier, manufacturing vitamins for your cells, filtering toxins, balancing fluids, bringing oxygen in, all these things, battling invaders. And while all of this stuff is being performed, we're basically unaware of that hard work that our bodies is doing, and we're doing our business. We're going about our business every day, not really thinking about it or actively participating in it, beyond the act of putting the food in our mouth and chewing it. And so I would love to see people, look at these labels, look at this food and understand that this is really vital for your health. And so you want to go about getting the healthiest food that you can, without putting yourself into more stress. Obviously, there's some things I always say get organic, and then there's other things I tell people, work towards it, or, find, and the second thing I would say is find new food sources. So if you don't currently go to the farmer's market or you're unaware of the local growers in your area, become familiar with them. Take a Saturday morning, go to the farmer's market, find out who the local farmers are, see who is growing food without chemicals, see who, ask them questions like, do they build their soil or do they spray chemicals? And find people that you can buy your food from that will supply you with healthy food, because it all begins in the soil. It all begins the way the food is grown. If your food is grown with chemicals, if you eat meat and the chicken or the pork or the cow, if they're fed genetically modified grains, or if they're, raised in a CAFO where they're not getting any grass, that type of thing, that meat is very different from the grass-fed meat that the local farmer might raise. So those two things would be huge.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tara. Where can people find you online? How can they learn more about your book? And do you have a website?
I do. The book is called The 180-Degree Wellness Revolution, Simple Steps to Prevent and Reverse Illness. And they can find the book at Amazon. It's a bestseller. It's actually been a bestseller for 2 years now.
Congratulations. Awesome, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's also one of their it's the number one top-rated book in several categories. And I have a website. It's www.cultivatinghealth.org. That's cultivatinghealth.org. And I'm also on Twitter, Tara Gesling. That's it's at GARAGESLING. And you can find me on Facebook at Cultivating Health, and just look for the emblem that's on my website.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tara. And if you're listening to this podcast and this message is resonating with you, and if you feel like, you've experienced some similar health issues that Tara has shared today, I want to highly encourage you to head on over to MichiganFamilyWellness.com and schedule a 20-minute complimentary phone consultation where we can begin a dialogue on how to best approach elevating your health and wellness. And remember, we'll have a dedicated webpage with all of the show notes that we've mentioned here at MichiganFamilyWellness.com, everything that Tara just mentioned, links to her book and her websites and social media. You can also expand those show notes right there on your mobile device if you're listening there, and you can take advantage of those clickable links right now. Well, Michigan families, all the parents listening, mothers and fathers, thank you so much, Tara, for coming on the podcast. You're a author, you're a wife, you're a mother, and you're a near-death experience survivor. Have I missed anything else?
I'm a happy person.
Absolutely. Well, you're very blessed, and I'm so grateful that you were able to come on the podcast today and share your experiences and bring value and benefits to the listenership here. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And remember, we can do far more together than we could ever do apart. Coming to you from beautiful Southeast Michigan, I'm your host, Dr. Kyle, and this is Michigan Family Wellness.
Now that you've been equipped with the latest in family wellness solutions, we want to encourage you to apply these strategies right away. But the thing is, there's still so much to learn. Connect with Dr. Wallner's Chiropractic and Nutrition office by going to MichiganFamilyWellness.com and click the newsletter sign-up button to join the informative and supportive community of chiropractic wellness. You will also receive as a gift from Dr. Wallner a copy of Michigan Family Wellness Solutions, an invaluable resource containing dynamic tools to elevate family health and vitality. Michigan Family Wellness wants to thank you for being part of today's podcast. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and give us a 5-star rating and review.